Hey everyone, before we get into the podcast, we want to announce some updates with our Power Monkey courses leading into 2022. We are excited about continuing to offer our gymnastics and weightlifting combo courses, 1 and 2 day offerings. If you go to powermonkeyfitness.com, search under the events tab, you'll be able to see what we already have on the agenda for 2022. We will be expanding into kettlebell offerings as well. Those are already up on the site too. If you're looking to host one yourself, please contact us at info@powermonkeyfitness.com and we'll get one of the courses out your way if one's not already on the agenda. Come hang out with us, learn some technical expertise when it comes to weightlifting, gymnastics, and now kettlebell. Hopefully see you soon. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn, and on today's episode, we have a return guest, a Power Monkey Camp coach and lecturer, and also the founder and creator of Driven Mind Training, Dawn Fletcher. Dawn is amazing. I love speaking with Dawn. She always has such great insight on how to take some of the mental tools that maybe some of us are missing and applying them into our physical training to become better all-around athlete. She's worked with over 25 CrossFit Games athletes, entrepreneurs, doctors, military service members, people from a variety of different backgrounds to be able to really hone in that mental training aspect. She was also a great athlete herself, having competed collegiately in 3 different sports. And she's also a high-level coach. She was one of the first people to get the CrossFit L3 coaching back in 2015. She knows the sport inside and out. She also actually contributed something new to our last camp. We had Ice Barrel on as a new sponsor, and Dawn is now an official Ice Barrel cold therapy coach. We talk a little bit about what that was all about and what the people experienced at our last camp in the fall. It's always great having Dawn on. We hope you guys enjoy this one. Well, hey, Dawn. Of course, always great to see you and have you back on. How are things going?
Great. Good to be here with you guys.
Well, we were just chatting off air about your busy weekend at the Legends Championship for the Masters competition. This is something fairly new, and we weren't able to be out there, but I'd love to hear how it went and what you thought about the comp.
It was great. The competition was here in San Diego at the Sheraton, which is right across the street from the hotel or from the airport. So it was just really convenient. I think they had about 400 Masters competitors. That's 35 plus in the CrossFit space. And this competition has just grown over the years. I was there when it first started at a gym space in San Diego County, and it's just gotten so huge. So it was super inspiring. They had it broadcast live. They had it commentated by Sean and Annie Sakamoto and Bill Grunler. So it was really stepping up as a competition.
Were you competing, or were you just there as a spectator because you live down there?
Yeah, I was here coaching a few athletes and largely just, shooting the shit with a lot of people, catching up. It was like a big CrossFit reunion. We haven't had a competition like that out here in a while.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like the Masters is where it's at in terms of numbers and people that have the time. I mean, obviously you get the visibility of the high-end CrossFit community, the Frasers and the Catrins and the rest of the world who are at the top of the game. But, the Masters are the ones who have maybe the time and some more of the disposable income and the ability to kind of go out and do these competitions. It's surprising that you don't see more of these, or maybe unsurprising that you're going to see it continue to grow in the way that it has over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it was great. Between the Legends competition and the Masters Fitness Collective, I think they're providing 2 really amazing opportunities for Masters to compete out of the CrossFit season. And it may even end up being that they are bigger and more sought after and or taking over the Masters competition in the near future.
They don't do Masters team stuff yet, do they?
They don't. Not that I've seen.
Chad, what if we created we should try and do a Masters team thing?
Are you asking me to compete in CrossFit? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to do that? I mean,
yeah, like me, you, Cheryl, and Vanessa.
Vanessa will kill all of us, but you just want somebody on the male side that you can dominate. That's what it is. You just want to make me look bad.
Come on, this is about a teamwork situation.
Yeah, I might be able to do a team. I mean, if you're going to throw it out there, I'll probably jump in.
I'd come to watch for sure. I'd coach y'all for sure.
We should start with that camp, and we should just have a bunch of the different groups just have at that Friday competition just be groups of 4 of all the Power Monkey staff competing against each other, starting off a Masters, just see who ends up standing at the end of the day.
As long as we put on the competition, we host it, so that way I have some control of the workouts. I'll be all right with that.
We could probably do that. Well, I'm glad to hear the weekend went well, and just to be able to get back out in person and see more of these Masters events is a pretty cool thing, considering that we're all Masters now, and we're all just excited to see people continue to push themselves and compete at a level that is normally reserved for the young guns, and it's good to see.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that I came across recently on your Instagram feed was just some topics that I think could be just 10 podcasts in and of themselves. And I wanted to kind of touch on a few of these piece by piece. There are little nuggets and topics that you seem to have connected with some of your clients. And each of those, I think, is a little topic that I'd like to dive into if you're open to it.
Great.
So really the one that at the top of the list here, you wrote, one of the topics you had discussed was the differences between anxiety and depression. And I would love to hear a little bit more about your perspective on those two things. And, I think all of us have some level of anxiety for a variety of reasons, probably fairly different in terms of how severe it can be, and it jumping to the level of depression, or there's a barrier between what those two things are. But I'm curious from your perspective as to how you distinguish between the two and how you navigate it when a client comes to you and has an issue with one or the other.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap, and sometimes it is more important for the client to distinguish, and sometimes it's honestly not, but more being able to ask that person questions about how they feel and their own experience, so that they can have dialogue around what they're experiencing and how they're feeling. So honestly, that some of it's not super clear cut, but depends where the client is. If they're looking to understand themselves better and they want to have better language around what they're going through, so that they can talk about it and maybe have some more clarity and understanding about themselves. But I guess a little bit more specifically, just understanding that depression and sadness can feel very heavy, can feel like a weight, can feel very daunting, and anxiety typically feels more nervousness, more edgy, more maybe anticipatory. It's a lot of very future oriented thinking around the what ifs and what could happen and how that is experienced in your body. So some people, again, I think it depends on the situation, but some people can be very helpful to just talk through the differences in how they're experiencing whatever it is that they're going through, and me being able to guide them with some further questions about that experience.
Mm-hmm. And just from a suggestion standpoint, say we're talking about anxiety and things like that, and anticipating what could come next or whatever might be happening, is talking through just a big part of that process, being able to have kind of support system, someone that you can trust, someone you can just kind of an ear that you can not even get solutions on, but just be able to vent. Is that kind of a big part of the process, is to be able to know that you have a support system there to be able to talk to?
Exactly. That's the huge part, is being able to be in a safe place where someone says, this is very normal. This is actually very healthy for you to experience your emotions, and to be able to navigate them, and to hopefully be able to communicate about them. And so you're exactly right. That's just it, is being in conversation with someone where you feel safe and you feel that you are actually being cared for, and someone's really listening and truly trying to help you honor your experience and meet you where you're at. And that's largely what I do for people, is a little less trying to provide solutions. We will get there, and when they're ready and they're asking for them, I will certainly help them brainstorm and try to work collaboratively in that process. But largely there's a lot of freedom in being able to fully express yourself and where you are.
Yeah, and I saw something else you had written here, and I feel like maybe a lot of us on staff or at camp and things like this have a similar personality, where you wrote, like, I can do it myself. I saw another post where you were talking about that, how you had a tendency to kind of take things on yourself. And I feel like I have the same personality, maybe Chad, you're the same way, where we feel like we can wade through all of the shit or the challenges on our own and need to lean less on the other people around us, and recognizing you yourself recognize that that's not always possible. So I'm curious if this was kind of a learning process for yourself too, to be able to say, maybe I can't always do it by myself, and that support system is as important for me as it is for the people that I'm working with.
Absolutely. And I might even be able to argue we can do it by ourselves, or we might be able to stumble through it to some degree by ourselves. But is it going to be as rewarding, fulfilling, as good as potentially it could be if we were navigating it with support?
Mm-hmm. Chad,
yeah.
I was going to say that's 100% my experience. I mean, I have a tendency to want to do everything on my own and get through, difficult circumstances that I've had in my life, and really some things that I've held in for almost 40, well, not for, I'm 41, so not 40 years now, but for a long, long time, 30, 35 years. And what I've come to realize is that even though I still have those tendencies, whenever I even just simply express one of those things, even if nobody says anything to me or gives me any comfort, just being in a group of people or with a person and mention something, that there's something very powerful about getting things off your chest, so to speak, as I think the starting point to really truly heal. Because for me, it almost feels like every time I do that, it's cheating, meaning that I'm so used to doing things on my own. And like you said, Dawn, like, yeah, you can do it on your own. And I was doing it on my own, and I thought I was doing okay. But whenever you feel the difference in expressing something to someone else or having a conversation about something, and you realize that everyone's going through something, or you come across someone that's gone through something similar or the same thing, you have such a sense of community and feeling like you aren't alone. And I think that's such a big part of it.
Yep.
We can talk about this particular topic for I think an entire podcast, because it is such a big topic where people are talking about, real issues today and trying to get through a lot of the challenges that people are going through. Not just because of pandemic, just because life in general kind of gets to you. But I do want to jump to the next one, because I think it touches on something that we haven't brought up too much, but Chad, this is kind of in your wheelhouse here. The next one on this list is fear of setting up for the snatch. And, this is another topic that maybe you had touched on with one of your clients. And I had, I'm going to break up Sadie because she's going to hate me for saying this, but, when we first started working with Chad close to a decade ago, she had never had a barbell in her hand before. She had never done any lifts. And I remember, Chad, we were doing a clinic together in New Jersey, I think. It was like one of the first clinics that we did. And Sadie was jumping into the clinic, and she was setting up her snatch, and she was so nervous to be around you. And she fell. She did a snatch, and the bar went over her head, and she landed on her butt, and the bar went all over the place. And she was so embarrassed and so nervous, and I didn't really help the situation. I would just get up, let's keep going. And you were so kind and so gentle and so, easy to kind of make sure that she was all right with it. But there is a real fear of getting set up for these lifts when people are completely new to these things, right? Not just because maybe it's a heavy weight, but just also the technique involved, and what am I doing when it goes from bar on ground to bar overhead? So I'm curious from both of your perspectives as to how you combat those kind of things, maybe from the mental side with you, Dawn, and Chad, maybe from a technical side.
Well, I have a question I would love to ask Chad, maybe after I answer your question. It's a lot around, I think athletes think that they have to believe that they will hit a lift in order for them to feel fully confident. And it's this kind of this false understanding that that in order to be confident, you have to believe, yes, I'm going to hit this lift. And I argue that largely in CrossFit and the sport of fitness, people are trying to find out what is possible. They don't know yet. And a lot of times when you're playing around 90% plus, you don't actually know if you're going to hit the lift. And that's a reality. And so instead of trying to convince yourself that you will, or that you're going to, I think as long as you believe you can, that's actually way more empowering. And then how do you set yourself up? How do you prepare to give yourself the best chance possible? So I guess I just asked the question, but Chad, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I try to talk to athletes about that, I think, very differently than they hear, or they think like, I have to walk up to this bar, I'm going to hit this, I'm going to hit this. Well, I can hit this, and here's what I'm going to do to set myself up for success. And focusing on, again, the setup, the breath, the mantras that they're thinking about, or the cues before they lift, and giving themselves the best chance possible, knowing that failure is a real thing, and it is a possibility.
Yeah, no, I talk about that exact thing with athletes all the time. In fact, it's, one of the major two basic concepts that I try to get across the athlete. One is mobility, the base of the mobility that they need, but also the base of the mindset, or the ability to focus through a snatch or a clean or a jerk or any movement. And how is it best to do that? And really the biggest part of that is getting them to let go of all these unnecessary thoughts, whether that be a portion of the lift that they're focusing on, or being disappointed, or kind of like Sadie was having trouble because she probably didn't want to disappoint me. She was in front of me for the first time and being coached, and all those things really get in your way, and they don't allow you the freedom to execute. So for me, absolutely at 90%. And now that I'm a master, it's less than that. It's 70% or 60%. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it on any given day when I'm training, especially. I don't snatch or clean and jerk near as often as I do. So I'm going in relatively cold, or really unaware of where I'm at and what I'm capable of on any given day. But what I do have is the ability to focus and execute with, I would say, almost complete freedom from caring what the end result is going to be. And what that means is that I make 99% of the weights that I put on the bar, because one reason, because I can go up and I can hit 3 or 4 weights as I'm building up that I don't know if I'm going to hit them or not, but I'm going to get to a spot where I say, okay, that's, especially for me as a master, that's enough for the day. If I'm going to do more than this, I need to take some time and I need to build back up to it. But the mental part is just huge. And again, going back to what Dawn was saying, and what I'm trying to express to athletes, is finding a way to get that freedom, And a big part of that was something that held me back for a number of years, that I was in just a tremendous slump, was fear of disappointing the people that were supporting me, fear of disappointing myself. And I was just completely desperate. My focus was nothing other than, please don't miss this lift. And, so that's where my mind was. And it did not allow that freedom to execute anything very well at all.
Yeah, and to bounce off of that, I would say to talk to the athlete about what are they afraid of, and being able to say whether it is disappointing their coach, or whether it is dumping this bar on my head. Okay, practicing failure is actually a really strong, a really good idea. Practicing failure, and at light weights, at moderate weights, practicing so to get used to the idea that as you continue to push what you're capable of, failure is going to be a part of your journey. And the more comfortable you can be with whatever failure you're most afraid of, the less grip it's going to hold on you over time.
Yeah, right? I think just saying, accepting any outcome, saying I might miss, and that's okay. But reminding yourself at the end, I also might make it. It's also possible for me to make it. What I need to do is just go do the best I can. And the best that you can do is essentially being in the moment and feeling your way through that lift, focusing on whatever cues are most important for you to execute most effectively.
I think that's an important piece, Chad, what you were saying. And I feel like we've maybe touched on in some other podcasts, what you were saying, because I had a similar experience of, a lot of my failures were revolved around me not wanting to let other people down. That's a big part of it too. And just feeling like, so many people are part of your support system to be able to get to the highest level, that they're a part of the process. They're a part of the success and the failures. And you don't want to be the reason that you let them down. But I'm curious, how did you overcome that? Or did you ever overcome that? What was it, this idea of being able to kind of come to terms saying, okay, sometimes I will fail, but yeah, sometimes I will succeed as well. But I'm curious what tools you use to be able to make that leap into someone that was able to use those potential failures and turn them into successes.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would say that probably none of us ever completely overcome these things. I think we just develop, more skills, stronger ability to tune out some of those things and to be able to overcome them more effectively and more easily than other athletes that may be less experienced. But I would say that the way that I got to where I'm at now is really nothing more than just continuing to try and continuing to show up,
Mhm.
because I really, and looking back, I did not reach out to anyone and really try to find help. And I think at that time, I didn't really even know to, you know what I'm saying? And it would have been like uh, for me, I would have looked down on myself a little bit if I reached out to someone and said, "Hey, I'm really struggling mentally. I don't know how to regain my focus when I'm lifting. I'm very unconfident right now." So it took me years to work myself out of that, and learning the hard way, just literally beating the shit out of myself mentally and emotionally and physically for many, many years, where it was unnecessary. And the exciting part to me about where we're at now in fitness and CrossFit and weightlifting is that we do have individuals like Dawn that are readily available to help, navigate athletes and just us as humans in general through this process. And I think it's obviously, we've talked about this many times before, but it's becoming more okay. And, my hope for those athletes out there, and I can see it, I can see that in some way our athletes in USA weightlifting that are just killing it on the international stage right now, most all of them, I mean, yes, you're always going to have a bad competition every now and then. More than likely, you're going to have one or two athletes that don't do as well as we hope that they would. But for the most part, I feel like they are more mentally and emotionally prepared for sure than I was when I was competing on the international stage. I kind of just got lucky, a number of times, I feel, because I was not firing on all cylinders when it came to the ability to focus and execute in the moment, and to be as confident as I could have been, or as I should have been. And my hope is that athletes out there will take these opportunities to reach out for help. And there's so many people out there that can help you navigate through that. And again, going back to what one of the things that we were talking about in the beginning of that is to express it to first to yourself, to
Mhm.
accept, hey, I am having a hard time, because I wouldn't even admit to myself that for years. But accepting that you have a problem, accepting that you're not doing very well, and then trying to figure out how to improve. And I think the first part of that is going to be saying it to someone, and it doesn't even matter who it is in the beginning, but ultimately probably needing to get some help from someone that's been there and gone through it, or a professional like Dawn.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I think that I always say that typically it's a process when I'm working with people, that I can't like sprinkle magic fairy dust on them in a conversation and things can change. But sometimes that does happen. It's literally just a conversation, and the person the next day sends me a message about their snatch PR, and they're like, holy shit, like I cannot believe how different my mindset was, my approach was. And then immediately they're reaping the benefits. And it's like, if that's available to you, or even if again that's an option, you could go through an arduous process on your own, and it could take a decade of struggling through something, or it could literally be a conversation and you could be like free from some of the maybe fears or anxieties you had around a specific thing like a lift or whatever else in your life. And again, that's maybe not the always the situation. I don't want to claim like that's like some kind of power. I think it is just the power of being able to voice where you're at and talk it over with somebody who truly understands. That can be an immediate shift in a very positive direction.
Yeah. I like this conversation. I like where we're going with this. And again, something that we probably talked about a little bit on some other podcasts here and there, Chad. And I'm in the exact same boat. We don't need to go into all of our own little backgrounds and struggles, but I think it's nice to touch on every once in a while, just to give listeners a perspective that reaching the top has many, many layers to it. And the struggles are as prevalent as the successes. You end up having to get beat down more than you end up at the top of the podium, and I think that that's important for people to understand. It's part of the process.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd like to ask Dawn a question on kind of this topic, of course, or this is the topic that's we're going to talk about the whole time. But when you work with athletes of any age and you talk about meeting them where they're at, and that's of course critical, it's so important. I mean, there's no sense in trying to teach them how to focus through a lift most effectively when, you know, they're just completely depressed. So where do you find most athletes are when they come to you? How many of them are ready to say, okay, you just need a method to use to focus through your movement to be more effective, you're good to go, versus how many of them need maybe a year of talking things through before they really even need to worry too much about the performance part of it?
Honestly, it's such a big variety over the last 10 or so years of doing this. I do work with people at all ends of the spectrum. They may just be looking for like some small performance enhancement as they're like maybe the top 10 or 20 athletes in the entire world. And we can talk through some of the more nuanced factors of performance. And other people, again, they may be coming to me because they see that I'm in the fitness or CrossFit space and they feel comfortable having dialogue with me. And then it ends up that I'm helping them get a therapist or helping them get some more advanced care and help. So I kind of bridge the gap between performance and therapy, but then help them get the proper care that they need that I just don't have training in. So honestly, it's all over the place, and I'm open to helping people again wherever they are, and knowing myself and what I feel like are my unique gifts and abilities to be able to care for somebody. It may be that I end up helping them get additional care, and that actually is something that I love to do too. So it's split. It's honestly pretty split in that, and I kind of think of it as like the triage approach, like help the athlete with what they need most at the time of our conversation. And I'm always looking at our well-being and our health as like the first priority. So if there's something that's keeping them from sleeping and eating and handling their stress and being able to show up in their lives in the way that they want to show up, we're gonna typically talk about that first. But some of the more performance techniques I think are really enjoyable for athletes to talk about. So I make sure we keep those integrated too, because that provides them with like that joy and that passion. And so it's just kind of an ebb and flow thing, you know?
Yeah, it's such an important characteristic to me of a good coach, a good teacher, a good professional in general, is to be willing to send someone somewhere else. Like there's no sense in, you know, you as the person that's trying to help someone spinning your wheels and just kind of making shit up, you know. I mean, yeah, there's some experimentation that can go on and you can improve in certain areas and stuff like that. But when you are very specialized and you know what you're good at and you know what you can most help athletes or people in general with, it's such an important part of this process in helping people the best that we can, is a lot of times sending them somewhere else. I mean, I definitely have done that, and I don't have any problem doing that. I've even had a couple athletes that I've worked with for years, and I've taken them to a certain point, and I'm continuing to try to help them improve. But I realized that, you know what, this athlete may be better off with a different eye, at least for a little bit, or moving forward, because I was only able to take them with my personality and their personality to a certain point, or even in the very beginning. You know, I might get a good feel or sense of that in general. Or if it's just someone that I don't want to deal with, then I might say, hey, no, I'm just kidding. I would never do that. I would at least give it a chance. But dang it, I had another question for you. It'll come back to me.
Well, I'm curious if you have any actual tangible performance techniques that we could pass along to some listeners that have worked with some of your clients that we might be able to pass along. Like, are there a handful that you kind of have seen to be very effective, or that you kind of use regularly that we might be able to pass along?
I feel like, I don't know, we need to narrow it down a little bit, because that's a pretty broad question. That's like, hey, what gymnastic skills are helpful for people? It's like,
sure,
shit.
let's talk about that.
Shit, like everything, right? Yeah, I think there's some more. I think talking it out is definitely I would say the number one, you know, is being able to talk about how you're doing and how you're feeling and what you're experiencing with the people who you feel you can trust. And if you don't feel like you can trust someone, trying to find that person, which is something tangible that people can do. Journaling.
Can I just ask one additional question on that? Finding someone that you can talk to doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be someone to give you an answer, right? Because sometimes it's just an ear, right? Just someone like we talked about earlier, like just someone that you can trust to be able to have an outlet to have a conversation with, not necessarily looking for solutions at all times. I think that's an important piece, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a conversation with you who might be able to give tools. It's just someone that you can kind of lean on a little bit that is in your community.
Yeah, honestly, as someone that you can be fully transparent and honest with, and sometimes it's a little bit easier when it's somebody outside of your inner circle of people that you engage with every day, whether it's your significant other, your friends, the people you live with, because we all get these certain roles in our relationships, and then there's certain expectations, and sometimes it actually, in some ways, keeps us trapped. And so finding somebody, it could be within your inner circle, but oftentimes it actually can be really healthy and cathartic for that person to be outside of the people you interact with daily or weekly, because there's not those pre-existing roles and expectations. There's, hey, like, here's what's going on with me, and here's the reality of how I feel, instead of sugarcoating it or trying to give an answer that you're hoping somebody else, or that you think somebody else wants you to say.
Makes sense.
So yeah, I think that's a really strong strategy. Journaling is another powerful strategy because it's another way to get it out of your insides, out of your head. And there's some different ways you can integrate that. But practicing that as a skill, it's not for everybody. And it certainly doesn't have to be something that you do, but it is another way to practice processing and getting things out of your own head. And that can be something that's really helpful and powerful for people. So it's typically something I have people try. And we even just share like an open journaling back and forth if they're open to it. So that way it's, and again, an additional benefit if it's now it's out of my head and on paper, and now somebody else is seeing it too. So it's very, it can be very scary. It can also be very freeing and empowering.
Awesome. Chad, did you remember what you talked about? Because there's another question I want to ask.
Oh, yes. Yes, I did. And just within all this that we're talking about, do you find any differences with what your approach needs to be with master's age athletes and different ages of masters in, 20 to 25 versus teenagers or youth athletes?
Absolutely. The conversations are different. There's more life experience, honestly, and they typically have more involved relational components with what they may be doing for work or what they're doing with their family and their relationships. So the conversations are certainly different when I'm talking to a 17 or 18-year-old athlete, when I'm talking to a 50-plus-year-old athlete. Some of the concepts may be similar, but largely where they are in their life is so different that the nature of what we're talking about and discussing is just different.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you mentioned in there about journaling that was really stuck out to me as well is you said it's not for everyone. And so I love that, because you're not saying that journaling is a part of my method and everyone has to do it. You're saying that it doesn't work for everyone. And I relate to that because so many people talk about visualizing and the importance of visualization. And I tried to force myself to do that for years when I'm just sitting by myself, closing my eyes, laying down in bed, trying to visualize successful attempts, or doing that literally while I'm sweating off weight right before the competition. I'm trying to visualize, or right before I lift, when I'm standing behind the bar, trying to visualize. And it's not something that ever worked for me. In fact, I think it was more hindering than it was helping. So I found my own way of, I guess, visualizing, and what that was for me when the very, it was rare that I did it. I didn't do it a whole lot, but when I did, quote unquote, visualize, I was trying to remember what certain parts of the lift felt like. So it was about feeling for me, as opposed to seeing myself move or do a successful lift. So I guess a couple things there. Do you notice that visualization isn't necessarily for everyone as well? And then going back to journaling, what are some things that you might recommend to someone that doesn't work for them, that journaling doesn't work for them?
Yeah, I would say the same thing about any and all of these practices, is that none of them are all for everybody, and it's about experimenting and finding weigh what might feel like it's helpful for you or what might feel like it's hindering for you in any way. So visualization is one of those things as well. For me, it's never been something that I've used maybe in what you think of a traditional sense, like envisioning yourself doing the thing well. I do like to think through how would I adapt to anything maybe going not well. And I do like to think through some situations and walk myself through like the worst case scenario, because I find some peace in being able to say like, okay, worst case scenario, if this happens, here's like my plan of attack. And I feel like that for me has been helpful in reducing anxiety. Feeling like you have a plan for things that might go wrong. But as far as like visualizing success, that again, that has, same as you, Chad, that has been something that really hasn't resonated with me or that I've used. So again, it's a tool, but none of these tools are for everyone, whether it's meditation, journaling, visualization, cold water therapy, and ice baths, like I talk a lot about. Any of these tools that can be helpful for some people mentally can certainly be unhelpful for other people mentally. You had a second question about journaling. Oh, what potentially could you begin to journal about?
Well, I was just saying, like, if you can obviously see that journaling doesn't work for that person, one, what else can they do? But also to add to that, what is the basic that we're trying to accomplish? So I do a lot of different things with different athletes, but and what happens is that people see that as I'm trying to do something completely different for each individual, but on a base level, I'm really trying to accomplish the same thing. So is the basic that you're trying to accomplish them getting stuff out of their head?
Awareness, absolutely, is personal awareness and greater understanding of their thought process, of their emotions, of their experiences. And so people can do that by thinking through it. People can do that by writing it out. People can do that by talking it out. And those would be like the three main ways. And finding healthy ways to do that, or maybe integrating those ways, which is what I find is most helpful, is kind of dabbling in a little bit of everything, so that you're making sure you're kind of like covering your bases.
Perfect.
Well,
I think
I wanted to, you mentioned in there, obviously there's a ton of tools, right? You said like we can go way deep in terms of the number of things you could potentially implement. One of the things that you mentioned in there that I want to touch on is cold water therapy. And we were really lucky to have Ice Barrel come out to our last camp, and they provided some amazing setup for us. And you've had some experience prior to coming to camp with cold water therapy and working with your athletes and yourself with it. And then you did a kind of a group discussion and a little intro into some cold water therapy. And I think it was pretty impactful for the people that participated in it. I think we had some unexpected reactions beyond just the therapeutic, physical components. There were some emotional components to it as well. Can you dive into kind of what cold therapy has kind of like done for you and your clients from a physical standpoint, but also some of the emotional impact of it as well?
Yeah, I think that was a really cool addition to camp this year, is being able to have the ice barrels there. I just signed on with Ice Barrel as like a Ice Barrel coach, so I'm really excited in working with them a bit more to create some like educational content around how to best utilize them. And I do think that largely people in sport and fitness in our culture think that, getting in there is going to help reduce inflammation. That's pretty much what they know from like a physiological standpoint, like, oh, it's good for my body for like after hard workouts to get in an ice bath. They don't, maybe really know why, but they think it's, it can largely be used for the reducing inflammation part of their athletic pursuits. And yes, that can be true, and it can feel really good on your body after a hot day or a hard workout. And also, again, it can be used as a tool for a lot of other purposes. And something we did at camp is like, I kind of talked the participants through, like, each time you come up to the ice barrel, you're gonna tell me why you want to do it. And it could be a host of reasons. I kind of walked them through and gave them some ideas that it could be you want to feel better physically, you have some pain going on in your joints. It could be that you want to practice overcoming a fear because ice cold water is really freaking uncomfortable. And maybe you want to work on your breathing and your response to discomfort or your ability to sustain pain. And so I gave them some options for what they might want to, might want to practice with the ice barrel, and had them give me like their intention for doing it before they got in the ice barrel. So that was really cool because we saw a host of different things come up from the dozens of participants who did the ice barrels. And Typically, we're doing between 60 seconds to up to 5 minutes, depending on how cold the water is or the person's experience level. But normally around 2 to 3 minutes at around 40-ish to maybe 50 degrees is going to give you a great response. And again, I think largely people don't know how awesome it can feel and how empowering it can feel. And it can be a very big confidence booster, knowing you're doing something that uncomfortable and you're gonna make it. You're gonna be able to breathe through it, and you're gonna be able to get out on the other side and hopefully carry that confidence into the next thing that you're gonna do.
Can you give some more recommendations on best usage of cold water therapy? You mentioned just duration within a given time period, but how often throughout a week? The temperature of the water, you said between 40 and 50 degrees. What are there benefits? I hear a lot of people even pushing the water a little bit colder. Are there benefits to getting closer to freezing temperatures, things like that? Can you go into a little bit more detail in terms of best usage?
Yeah, for a beginner, if it's not something that you've done regularly with consistency, I would say even cold showers is a great place to start. Finishing your shower with 10 to 30 seconds of as cold as your handle will go, and practicing again, just taking deep breaths in response to that, trying to relax the tension in your face and in your body, letting the cold water hit all parts of your body. And again, taking notes on your experience, like how did that feel afterwards? Was it invigorating? Was it helpful in any way? Or again, was there any maybe downsides to that experience? So cold water in a shower is a great place to start, especially if you're a beginner, or even doing certain parts of your body like arms or legs, and just trying to dose parts of your body if you haven't done it before, because again, that extreme cold can just be very daunting. So there's ways to kind of integrate and ramp somebody up to the point where they're doing like a full submerge of their body, shoulders under, and going into temperatures under 50 degrees or under 40 degrees. So building up to that point where if you're again comfortable and over time you've gained some consistency in your experience, you may be going right around freezing, and doing that for 2 to max 3 minutes. But again, I wouldn't really suggest that unless you've ramped up to that place and or you have somebody there with you that can guide you through that.
And doing it potentially daily?
Absolutely. I mean, I have 2 ice baths now at home, and it can be something that you integrate into your daily practice. It's the most potent thing. The reason why I'm such a big fan of it is I can't think of anything that in 2 minutes of time can have as many physiological and psychological benefits. And I have yet to find anything I've been in the performance space like 15 years. And I figure if 2 minutes of my time can have that many potent effects, like I'm all about efficiency. I'm always trying to find like what's the least I can do to get the most benefit, the minimum effective dose. And that's the way I train. That's the way I work. That's like the concept of that largely I follow for a lot of ways in that I live. And so ice baths from a performance standpoint and a psychological standpoint, for me, I think are the most potent thing that I found.
Now, what about contrast bath? And I'm curious, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do for someone at home, right?
No.
To be able to set up, like if you're lucky enough to have an ice barrel, or you're lucky enough to have some kind of sauna or something like that where you can get into extreme temperatures, you're in a lucky situation, right? I found a lot of benefit from contrast baths when I was at the Olympic Training Center, being able to jump from pool to pool. That to me had some of the most immediate and noticeable impact in terms of recovery. Would you say that something like a contrast bath has a differing effect rather than just sitting in cold plunge? And would you say that it is something that could be worked in conjunction with just sitting in cold ice bath? But I'm curious what your thoughts are on contrast bath in conjunction or separately from just cold bath on its own.
Yeah, you're right. It's not maybe as practical, and even ice baths are not super practical. If you live somewhere where there's cold water in like a river and ocean, it may be even just as easy to integrate that. But yeah, I mean, largely, again, getting yourself in extreme heat and extreme cold and like temperature regulation, even just practice for yourself, being able to again, mentally and physiologically be able to like handle that discomfort, and then letting your body practice dealing with those extreme temperatures is again going to only help you be more robust. And then from a recovery standpoint, with like a blood flow standpoint, that's also going to really expedite. It can be really expedite, like you said, like how good you feel and how well and quickly you are recovered. So they could be used separately. They could be used in conjunction. The cool thing about some of this right now is there isn't a lot of research to necessarily say one method, or there's certain parameters around a method that are like best practices. It really is a lot for the person and the athlete to be able to experiment with and try and see what really helps them, and almost like, again, use it as a practice for yourself to say, like, I'm going to see what helps me, and then I'm going to integrate based off of that, and really kind of collect data that way for yourself personally. But I say, yeah, try it all, whether it's consistent ice baths or whether you have the opportunity to do some contrast therapy and being able to integrate that. If you did, I would say even a daily practice if possible.
I have just one last question, and Chad, you can jump in and ask anything you have on this, but time of day. Is there an optimal time of day? We talk a lot about when we were at camp, most people were doing it post-workout, right? Super hot. You wanted to kind of use it as a way to cool down. I don't know if that's maximum benefit, but I think it was kind of like an easier way for someone to jump in freezing cold water because they were already, their core temperature was already so raised. But it's something early in the morning, and we see a lot of people kind of jumping into cold showers to kind of get their day started. I was told when we were at the training center that doing it right before bed was not optimal. Like straight cold water, like if we were doing contrast bath, to end on warm before going to bed. But I'm curious if you have any experience in terms of optimal time during the day when you see the most benefit.
Again, it totally depends on your purpose. For me, like largely using ice, cold exposure for like overcoming fear and tapping into courage and brevity, and largely that is really helpful for me in the morning. I wouldn't say first thing. I would say try to let your like body's natural cortisol wake you up and be in the natural sunlight, and then potentially like in the first hour of your day, or like after the first hour of your day, cold exposure. But also can be used like midday for me, and in replacement of a nap. Like if I'm feeling like a midday lull and it's like, hey, I could just lay down for an hour, it's like, oh, I also could take a 2-minute ice bath. Again, depending on the purpose and the utilization of it. I think for me, morning and mid-morning is definitely the best because it gives me a huge wave of energy. But some people do use like cold showers at night to bring their core temperature down, because it also is shown that if you're like sleeping with a cooler temperature, that you're gonna sleep deeper for longer. So depending on the purpose, I would say it typically amps people up, and it typically gives you a big boost of energy. So morning, mid-morning, or midday is what I suggest most of the time.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely. What I love most about the cold plunge is, you've said it many times, Dawn, purpose. There's an obvious purpose for anyone. If you're going to get into a bath like that and be that uncomfortable, or like, what we have to do in weightlifting or wrestling, mixed martial arts, is sweat for a long period of time. You got to be very initially uncomfortable to get in that amount of heat, but then to be able to stay in it and to take off, if you got to take off 5 pounds, for example, those last couple of pounds are going to be extremely uncomfortable. So, just when you're talking about this, it takes my mind back to all those hours that I've spent in those uncomfortable situations, which does make ice baths a little bit easier. But there's got to be an obvious purpose. And there are also those individuals out there that will say that ice baths maybe are not that physiologically beneficial in regards to recovery, right? So they're going to say that.
For sure.
So when I hear that and I look back on all the ice baths that I took, it's like, man, I wasted so much time doing those things. But one way that I think about it is that it felt good to me. I felt like it helped me recover. So whether that was physiologically true or whether it was placebo, I guess I don't really need to care. But on the other side of that too, one thing that I got from you at this last camp, and I'm always taking every single camp, I take at least one thing from you, Dawn, but it was that if nothing else, I got so much toughness out of that. It's like to be able to make myself get into that ice bath probably 3 times a week for years, to be uncomfortable, to not want to do it, and then to get in there and do it anyway. So who cares about the physiological benefit of recovery? I got so much good mental toughness training by doing that. And I would say my purpose for getting in there the one time that I did at camp was just to see if I could do it again, to see how I would handle it. That water was cold. I mean, it's probably a little colder than even I was used to getting into. I could only get my tub with ice so cold. So those ice barrels were a little extra cold. And so it was all about just challenging myself. And if I get in there again, it's going to be about challenging myself. It's not going to be about recovery. It's going to be about that challenge. So I love the extreme purpose that is required.
Did you get Ella in there with you? Your daughter?
No, I think we were kind of shut down by the time
All right.
she got there. But yeah, I know she would do it just to.
I got Alessia in there with me for one of them, and just I think she was so excited to see other people jumping in water that she thought it was a good idea. And we got her in there, like she got up to her shoulders for a couple seconds. So I was like, all right, at 4 years old, I think that was a pretty big jump for someone to get into a cold plunge. But yeah, it's pretty cool to see kind of responses and different people's reasoning behind it.
How long did she stay in there? When was she ready to get out?
We got a picture or two. I think Jordan might have snapped a shot, and that was about it. But I think it was kind of putting the toe in, and next time we'll see if she can sit. Her and Hadley, the little kids that run around camp, are going to be taking over camp pretty soon. Each camp they kind of do a little bit more and more. They're going to be snatching and doing cold plunge pretty soon. Hey,
the toe's the worst part, man. The toe's the absolute worst part.
Well, they say that with cold plunge that you should go in quickly, right? You shouldn't do like a toe at a time. That you should just try and go in as quickly as possible. Your body kind of gets used to the water more quickly than trying to go at a toe at a time. It's much worse if you try to do it that way. Is that right, Don?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're getting close to the hour, but I do want to touch on one other element on this list that you had written out, and I just want to get your perspective on it. And it's moving towards alignment, and kind of what this means to you, and how you normally kind of engage with a client when with regards to what this idea means about moving towards alignment.
Dave, that's a big one you just dropped.
All right.
Yeah, I define alignment as moving towards your truths, your values, and your visions. So essentially what matters to you and where you want to go. Are you living in line with that? And that takes a bit of time to kind of work through with somebody, because you obviously you want to understand, what are your values? What are your truths? What are your beliefs? What are the systems that drive how you live in this world and how you want to navigate this world? And so helping someone discover their values and their truths and their visions, and then helping someone understand what's standing in your way from living in this greater alignment. Typically it's some fears, typically it's some circumstances or some relationships that are keeping people from truly living their truest life. And that's a big part of something that I work on with individuals, whether they're, again, high performing athletes or they're just looking for self-improvement, is helping them understand themselves, and then helping them understand in what ways are they not living their truest, most aligned lives. And I don't think there is like an end point. It's not like, oh, I'm 100% there. It's like, hey, I might ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how aligned do you feel like you're living in regards to your truths, your values, and your visions? And that just opens up a conversation for somebody. They might say, 4 or 5, and here's why. Or they might say an 8 or 9 or 10, and here's why. And so just trying to have dialogue around that, and then use that as a major concept of what guides our conversations and helping someone live a more aligned life.
Mm-hmm. Man, this is a big topic. You're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I tried to do my best.
No, not at all.
Just like.
I'm trying to think about it from my own perspective too. I don't know how you guys feel, Chad, what your thoughts are on it, but sometimes I feel like I have polar opposite thought processes when it comes to what my alignment looks like. Because sometimes I'm like, I want to be like incredibly ambitious, and I want to be like go 100 miles an hour at all times, and then the next moment I just want to shut off from the world and go and live in the middle of nowhere and not see anyone anymore. And it's like a polar opposite thought process. And I don't know if that's like normal, or if it's just a reaction to being inundated by so much stuff these days. But, I feel like I do kind of move quite a bit in terms of extremes with what that alignment might look like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's just it, is like we all are very complex beings, right? We have a lot of, whether it's interests or passions or things being thrown at us, and it's can I meet myself where I am and integrate all or most, if not all of those concepts into my life, right? Like, yeah, can I chill? Can I also be driven? Can I also, can I make sure that certain parts of me are being expressed? And I think that's exactly it. It's not just like one part of me all the time. It's like, hey, all parts of me some of the time.
Right.
Yeah, it is interesting what you say, and this topic is just thought provoking. I think if nothing else, just to bring it up and to have people hear a little bit about it is going to be important, because it's going to make them think, just like it made me think a lot, about what's really important in my life. And I do go back and forth from wanting to accomplish certain things that I'm continually working on, that I'm striving for every day. And that's the biggest part of me. But sometimes I will, like you, Dave, I will be like, well, why don't I just do something that provides me to live life as comfortably as possible, but provides time to spend with family. And that is, in the end, could be good enough for me, or would that be good enough for me? But when I think about that, a common denominator for me, that I think is a common denominator for most people, is that family part of it. So no matter what I'm doing, I want to be able to spend time with family and have relationships and all these different types of things. And I think, I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's just another reminder of that one thing that really is most important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, it's about experiences too, to be able to say that we did the things that we intended to. We traveled to the places, we saw the people that we wanted to, we experienced the things that we wanted to in life. And if those things go hand in hand, if we're able to be ambitious and our alignment, the experiences are part of what that alignment means for you as a person, to be able to say, you did all the things you wanted to do, then great. But to me, Chad, you're right. The family component is such a big part of it, to be able to, I think we've been very lucky that we've been able to travel so much, but also travel so much with our significant others, with Jody being someone very engaged in the work that you do, and Sadie being with me similarly. And Dawn, I don't know if Crystal travels with you, but she's very active within the world as well, within fitness and everything. But I think we're pretty lucky in the fact that our family, our immediate family, has been a part of what we do. But to me, the experience component is, when we're coming towards our last days, do we want to be able to say that we did the things that we want to do with the people that we wanted around?
Yeah, and being able to, I think, use that concept to help us make decisions. Like, is this aligned with the person who I am and the person who I want to become? And I think oftentimes people don't even use that to filter, right? Like how they make their decisions in this life. And that's why you get caught up with all this shit you don't even either care about or want to do. And you end up in these spaces where you're like, you're really unhappy and unfulfilled and not feeling very purposeful and engaged in what you're doing. So just using that question as a filter, for how to determine what you want to be part of. It's something that I've used in seeing how much I want to be part of Power Monkey. Is yes, this is directly in line with who I want to be and the things that matter to me. And that's something that I can give time and energy to in my year, in my calendar, because of those reasons. And so it helps you then to be able to find different communities and different projects potentially that are just more true to what matters to you and what you care about.
So first step in terms of finding alignment is figuring out what you want, right? Writing those things down.
What you care about. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Writing
What matters.
out, and then what are the things that are going to allow you to kind of chip away at making that a reality?
For sure.
All right. I love it. I don't think that we need to go through I think I remember your answer from last time, and I think it was a check in my box, but
yeah, not unless she's going to say weightlifting. We don't need to ask
it. But I do want to see if there's anyone else that has come across, you've come across lately that might be another good podcast guest for us. Anyone that you've listened to or spoken with or come across lately that you think would be a good interview for us?
Oh, I might get back to you on some names, but have you all ever had Samantha Briggs on?
Yeah, we have had Sam on.
Okay.
Yeah, she's great.
Okay, cool. I was gonna see if potentially we could do like a bring me and an athlete who I've worked with on together.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But you all bring up a lot of the same concepts because you're athletes or have been athletes yourself too. So we kind of do that as well in this podcast. But
I think it would be kind of interesting though, especially a current athlete, to kind of go through what's what we're talking about was more than a decade ago. Chad's a little bit more present because he does a lot of master competitions, but I think it would be really cool to listen to some of the current things that are going through an athlete's head. Someone like a Sam or another athlete that you work with at the highest level would be pretty interesting.
You all have had Facundo on. I just listened to him on the podcast, and I was actually like really intrigued because I didn't know much of his story, and I was like, wow, it was awesome to fill in all these gaps that I didn't know about.
I think even what we had on the podcast with Facundo too is just like a fraction of his story. The dude has like lived like 10 lives.
Totally. I was very engaged in his story.
Yeah. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of bringing especially a high level CrossFitter on. We're talking about gymnastics and weightlifting mostly here. I'm talking about focusing through a snatch. Well, what about being able to get through an entire weekend of CrossFit workouts, or to be able to just get through a CrossFit workout in general as a general member from a gym. So I think that's a great idea. And these topics, they can't be covered enough. There's always going to be something different said. There's always going to be something different to take away. So I absolutely think that we should jump on again with you, Don, by yourself or with whoever else. I think it'd be great. Even Facundo, throw him in there as well.
You can get him back out.
Thank you both for your honesty and sharing some of your own challenges as an athlete, because I think it really helps just to continue to give the topic and give the subject more exposure, that it's just, there's going to be different challenges that we all face, and especially the higher level we're trying to pursue. So
yeah, it only took 15 years to be able to open up and talk about it.
I know, oh man. Yeah,
y'all don't let it take this long. If you're listening, don't let it take that long.
No, too long. Get on it right now. Just go ahead and spill your guts, and you'll definitely be better off for it. But Don, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on again and to chat with you. I think all of us from Power Monkey Camp, we all wish we could get together more often. And it's always just a solid reminder that when we have someone from camp on, and we're so thankful that you're a part of the community and that you're doing what you do. You're doing an incredible job. Is there anything that you have coming up that you want folks to know about, and where can they keep up with you?
Honestly, I'm pursuing some really cool consulting gigs. I'm excited for this next year to see how it all transpires, but drivenmindtraining.com and social media at drivenmindtraining is the best place to keep up.
Perfect. Well, to our listeners out there, check Dawn out. If you're not following her already, please do so. If you have not listened to our first recording with Dawn, then I would highly recommend that you go do that as well. You finish this one now, go listen to the other one, and you'll be better off for it for sure. Also, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also, check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.